And so, yet another installment into the hidden history of the African American fighting man. Listen very closely, Mississippi, because Mississippi sent 17,000 African American men to fight for their freedom with the Union forces, and they were victorious, regardless of what you see on the flagpole. This excerpt coming from a report from the Honorable Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War, December 5th, 1863. This is the actual report. He says this: many persons believed or pretended to believe and confidently asserted that freed slaves would not make good soldiers, that they would lack courage and could not be subjected to military discipline. Facts have shown now groundless were these apprehensions. The slave has proved his manhood and his capacity as an infantry soldier at Milliken's Bend, at the assault on Port Hudson, and the storming of Fort Wagner. The apt qualifications of the colored man for artillery service have long been known and recognized by the Navy service. You see, the Navy had already employed African Americans as boys, that's what they called on ships. And the subjoined extract from an official report shows that shows what we can do in cavalry service. So the Secretary of War, pulled up this extract from another report, and it says thusly, speaking of Mississippi: on the 17th instant, 30 men of Company A, 1st Mississippi Cavalry, which is part of the U.S. Colored Cavalry, in connection with 50 men of the 1st Battalion, 4th Illinois Cavalry, while on a scout up the Yazoo Valley, met 1 mile beyond Sataria, 150 picked men of 1 Texas Cavalry Confederate. The 1st Mississippi behaved nobly, neither lacking courage nor steadiness, firing with coolness and precision. The engagement lasted half hour. The Texans being totally routed and demoralized, we captured 28 stand of arms and 7 prisoners. That happened in and around Yazoo City, Chula area. U.S. Colored Cavalry were very, very prominent in that area, folks, and they had several victories. Not that anyone there would admit it or anyone there would know it. But Mississippi sent was the second. Well, they sent the second most African American troops to U.S. forces. You understand that they won. They're proud Mississippians, proud Southerners. There are some who would suggest that Mississippi lost. It didn't. Their native sons were very successful with defeating the enemy, who were also some of their native sons, shall I say, or Mississippi's native sons. All right, let's get to it here, folks. Before I get into this the sex talk, interesting thing happened in Texas. You know, as a result of the terrorist attack there in outside of San Antonio. Actually, it's near Schlitterbahn, a very nice amusement park there. I went there, took my children there way back when. Nice area, nice river too. Well, as fate would have it, in this little town here, oh, I'm sorry, I said Texas. Actually, it's not. It's Tennessee. I thought it was Texas. I apologize for that. Actually, it's near Knoxville. The Knoxville News Sentinel actually produced this story. And it's a story about an 80-year-old man who felt that as a result of what happened there in Texas, that his church should have guns. That's what he felt. He felt that the United Methodist Church in Talcott Plains, Tennessee, would be better off by having guns. So he brought his gun. He did. A .38, matter of fact. And he decided to demonstrate, basically, what his concept was and what a good marksman he was and how to handle it. So the 80-year-old man pulled his gun during a discussion about the guns and encouraging people to feel quite confident that having a gun in church was not a bad thing. Although he pulled the magazine out of the gun, once he reloaded the magazine, it loaded around into the gun's chamber. Now, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't. Well, what you have here, a round is now sitting waiting to be discharged is what you have. A fellow churchgoer then asked to see his Ruger, and according to the Tellico Plains Police Chief Russ Parks, that's when the bullets began to fly. He pulled, he pulled it back out and said, "With this loaded indicator, I can tell that it's not loaded." Now, I don't know what he meant by this. That's what the guy said, the other churchgoer. With this loaded indicator, and maybe some of you guys know a Ruger, and I don't know what kind this was. Nevertheless, he really thought that that was not a round chambered. Well, he pulled the trigger. Well, I just want you to know, right there in the church, there was gunfire. Not only did the man shoot himself in the hand, but the bullet also entered his wife's abdomen and exited. The couple was airlifted to a hospital. I'm not laughing at them. I certainly hope they're well. But this is the ridiculousness of this. I mean, folks, I'm a gun owner. And I'm going to tell you something, this happens more often than not, and anywhere where you have firearms, it is not a safe environment. We can debate it if you'd like. Is it safer with having firearms around you or without? I'm just going to tell you that. Now, don't get me wrong. God knows if someone else has got a firearm and they're trying to break in my house, it's safer for me to have a firearm, right? No argument. But I feel more than capable of that if there were no guns around me. I feel a lot safer. You, Ro?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no possibility that somehow or another one of us is going to get shot accidentally. You know what I mean? I feel safer with a bow and arrow or a slingshot, than having a firearm. I mean, they don't just go off automatically. Well, I mean, maybe some heat. Maybe some of you guys would know it better than I do. I've not heard that. Typically, it takes some kind of jarring for a firearm to go off. The idea that black powder there would just automatically ignite. I guess if it gets hot enough. All right, let's get into this. Whitlock, is it okay or generally acceptable now that if a woman is insulted, for her to give a man a good slap across the cheek?
If it's necessary.
So it's acceptable by the man?
I wouldn't mind defending Gar.
No, I'm asking you whether or not that is acceptable, meaning, okay, that it is, if in fact a woman is insulted, verbally or even physically, she's handled in such a way that she feels improperly.
I mean, you just can't go around picking fights, but if you feel it's necessary.
Have you ever done that?
I have pushed someone off of me, yeah.
You've not slapped him, though?
No.
You ever known any woman to slap a guy as of late?
Not lately.
You ever known a woman to slap a guy in your lifetime?
No. I saw a woman slap another woman, but not a woman slap a man.
Well, yeah, I know about that bathroom thing. It's climax there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Don't slap me, because I'm not in the mood. We got to play that. So, Ro, what about you? You familiar, or have you ever been slapped by a woman because you said something or acted in such a way that was unacceptable by her?
I've been slapped by a woman, so obviously she thought something I did was unacceptable. No, nothing overt or any kind of assault or anything like that. It was actually a greeting from someone that I hadn't seen in a while.
And she slapped you?
Yeah, she slapped me. Yes, she slapped me.
She must have missed you.
No, she didn't.
You were about to say to spit out your mouth.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, right.
So yes, I have been on the receiving end of a slap.
But it wasn't fun for that.
No, it didn't feel like fun, Rip. Didn't feel like fun at all.
It was a greeting. You just said it was a greeting.
It was a greeting, but it didn't feel like it was like a happy, hi, how are you greeting.
Well, you didn't. I mean, you felt that you needed.
She did it and walked away, Rip.
Well, that's the way you do it.
That's how you get your point across.
I'm just saying, every time I've been slapped, that's what they do. Is they walk away, run, whatever.
You don't stick around and ask how it feels. How does it feel?
Well, no, but I mean, if it's like a handshake
Put on a
or
helmet.
a high five, usually conversation follows, but no, not that time. So yes.
I'm just simply asking: is it acceptable? Is it acceptable? Let's say you're out somewhere, and we had a show on this about ladies going into clubs and so forth and being groped or grabbed in such a way. So a woman turns around and automatically slaps this guy. So is that acceptable? Does that guy say, okay, look, he acknowledges that he did something wrong and was deserving of a slap?
With these little punks nowadays, Rip, I'm more inclined to see a dude slap a girl back.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like that would be the more common reaction nowadays to the environment in which that would happen, i.e.
So have you seen this? Would you agree with that, Whitlock?
About a guy slapping a female first?
Well, no, that's not what he said.
Slapping her back.
Slapping her back?
As
Yeah,
opposed
she
to
probably
just
gets
taking that
slapped back.
slap.
Yeah, she'll get slapped back.
So it's not acceptable then. In other words, the idea of a woman showing her discontent or her insult with how a man talks to her or what he says to her or how he grabs her.
You just don't know how the guy would act.
Well, you don't know, but that's why I'm asking whether it's acceptable. When I say acceptable, in other words, it's it's generally women are able to show their insult by doing something.
Without any kind of response. And to answer the question, I think it's very much less acceptable or accepted than it had been in previous
Which
years.
means that if a woman would be afraid of rebuffing a guy, would be afraid of actually demonstrating that something was unacceptable.
Yeah, more now than before. Yeah, I would say so.
So Whitlock, without going into great details, I don't want to embarrass you. So you had to push someone off of you.
Yes.
So, meaning what exactly? Meaning that they were just too close and you just pushed them, right?
They had the liberty to actually touch me. Kind of like that image that you think of with a woman walking in a club and a guy groping, holding her hand or grabbing her arm while she's trying to go to the bathroom. People feel like they can just come up and touch you or touch your hair, put their hands on you physically. So I'm not going to exchange too many words. If you do something like that, I'm going to just keep it pushing. But I am going to get you up off of me, and you are going to remove your hands.
So let me understand this. So then, and I don't know why this is so difficult for you guys to come out with this. So you sound cool or something? So a man grabs your arm.
Yeah, Shawty, come here, Shawty.
Okay. And is it acceptable for you to turn and show your discontent by slapping the hell out of him? Or saying something that is unladylike?
The second route would probably be the safest.
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
Okay.
Not interested in you guys.
Huh.
But that first way might react in a slap return.
So it's a different time now, I
Yes.
guess.
Men don't have the respect for women as it used to be. Not to say that it's much different or different time. It's just men are a little bit more physical.
Okay, I brought that up for a reason, folks. It's this. With all that is being said here regarding sexual assault, unwarranted come-ons, whatever you want to call it, we come from a time back when Judge Moore was around and even Al Franken was around when it was acceptable. It was generally acceptable that if, in fact, you said something or did something that is appalling or insulting to a woman, that there would be some retaliation from a lady. And it's not that a man wanted to be slapped, but there were things we knew we couldn't get away with without some kind of rebuff, and that no one would defend us. No one would defend us. You walked up, you grabbed a woman's posterior, all while dancing with your hand went down and you cupped her posterior, and she went back and slapped the heck out of you. Then you took that. You took the people laughing at you. You took that humiliation and other women pointing at you saying, nasty. There was a time during Al Franken and Judge Moore's time and Donald John's time when we knew what was unacceptable. And we also knew that it was acceptable on our part to be straightened up. So there's no excuse. We knew. For a grown lady. Children, different story. I'll get to that in a minute. So now, he would turn the clock forward, 40 years, 50 years. And we've got these men who are now looking back upon those times and suggesting that, it was okay. It was, well, no, it was, no, it was okay. And I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. It was during those days that women did, in fact, have a significant amount of support. No, really. Even if it was just a deaconess on the front pews of the Baptist church, let me just tell you, the women circled the wagons around women, other women and girls. You just didn't do that. And daddies, it was a time when daddies and brothers and cousins defended the women folk. Now, I'm not going to say it happened like that in every hamlet or every village, but that was generally acceptable, that you just didn't walk in there and talk to a man's daughter without his permission. I'm just going to tell you, you better go talk to him first. Of course, that was a time, obviously, when you had more dads in households, no doubt. But go with me on this. When you start talking about what happened 20, 30 years ago, I'm describing basically what was generally accepted. Even in the movies, it was not unusual, you know what I mean, to see movies whereby there were things. I mean, Mary Tyler Moore and Van Dyke weren't even sleeping in the same bed. I mean, you got to understand, in the 60s, coming up, it wasn't until the 70s that you actually had this merging of actual seeing two men in bed, not two men, a woman, never see two men, a woman and a man in a bed together, let alone indulging. So, I mean, it was a prudish time, one can argue. There were some clearly defined boundaries that you just didn't cross. And if you crossed them, then there was some recourse. When I look at what happened with Al Franken, when I look at what happened even with Bill Cosby, I ask myself, well, why did these ladies at that point have some recourse? They did. Now, it all depends on whether or not they feel it would be worth their career, or whether they handle the matter there, or... And look, of course, needless to say, when you start adding drugs to the situation, totally different story, like in the case of Bill Cosby. However, these are grown women, and at some point there is an expectation that this woman, especially during those days, would say absolutely not. No. I'm not saying anything in defense of anybody. I'm just describing it at this point. So I want to go to the woman who has accused Al Franken. I want to just hear her description. Look, I don't know Al. I know he's a comedian. I didn't think he was a good one. I never really got into his jokes. He seems to be a pretty fair senator when I see him in hearings and all. He's asking very poignant questions that I think should be asked. But I want to play this because the question I'm trying to figure out, is this a sexual assault? Or is this a jerk? Or a comedian who is trying to make laughs at the expense of her? Or a guy who's trying to see how far he can go and looking to be slapped? And did he get one?
He should have. He should have.
So, here is Leanne Tweeden, and Al Franken were doing some USO entertainment, and I mean this is before he became a senator. He was a comedian, and she was there with him as a co-host. And here's what she said happened.
So it was just me and Al backstage, and he had his little props for the rest of his show, for the rest of his little skits by himself, and he's like, well, we need to practice the kissing scene. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I just sort of blew him off because I didn't, like, we don't need to practice the kissing scene. It's just a quick little thing, you know. And then he persisted, and he's like, no, we really need to practice the kissing scene. And like, okay, Al, you just turn your head right, I'll turn my head right, we got this, you know, whatever. And he kept persisting, and I'm like, Al, this isn't SNL. We're not really going to kiss, so we don't really have to practice. And he just kept persisting, and it just reminded me of like the Harvey Weinstein tape that you heard the girl when she was wired up for the the NYPD, and he's just persistent and badgering and just relentless, you know. And so I was just like, okay, fine, just so he would shut up, you know.
Oh, she agreed.
And he just sort of came at me, and we did the line, and he came at me, and before you even know it, I mean, you kind of get close, and he just put his hand on the back of my head and
that back of the head thing.
mashed his face against. I mean, it happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my
Back of the
face,
head thing.
and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast.
Eeh.
And all I can remember is that his
Eeh.
lips were really wet, and it was slimy.
Yeah.
In my mind, I called him fish lips the rest of the trip because that's just what it.
Ha-ha, she got a laugh out of
Why?
that. Fish lips.
And he stuck his tongue down my
Fish lips.
mouth, and I remember I pushed him off with my hands.
Eeh.
And I just remember I almost punched him, because every time I see him now,
Oh.
like my hands
Well,
clench
why
in
didn't you?
fists, and I'm sure that's probably why. And I
Should've.
said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm not going to be so nice about it the second time.
Huh?
And I
Yeah.
just walked out away from him, and I walked out, and I just wanted to find a bathroom, and I just wanted to rinse my mouth out because I was
Well,
just disgusted. You know, it was just one of those. I don't know. I was.
You
violated.
think you didn't see
Felt
that
like,
coming?
You know.
Stop it right there.
Right.
Look, I'm not calling out anything, but the guy talking about rehearsing, kissing, and so forth. I mean, that's the oldest trick in the book. Let's just practice. I'm not really gonna kiss you, okay? I'm not really gonna do it. I'm just want to practice the show because we in the playing.
But she would have said that he said he wasn't really going to do it, and then snuck it in on her. But he told her, "I want to practice this."
That's the oldest trick in the book.
We should really practice.
She didn't see
this
that coming.
in this scene. What do you think?
By the way,
Practice kiss. Hey, what about that
I like
kiss?
that fish lips thing.
I think
There was a
kiss-
time when guys would lick their lips before they kissed. I want you to know that, ladies.
That's disgusting.
I just want you to. But they were getting rid of that chap. You didn't want to feel that crust. It's either the crust or
Somebody
it's
want
that.
on the side of their
It's
mouth.
either the crust or it's the yogurt. One or the other.
You want your lips
What
cut?
do you want? The yogurt or the crust?
Neither. I'll pass on both. I'll kiss
I
myself.
mean, some of us have big soup coolers, and you got a moist. They didn't have the moisture.
what
that-
chapstick
They
is
didn't.
for.
Well, they were only Vaseline then, and then it slides. That's a little.
Absolutely.
You put Vaseline on your lips. All right, but let's go ahead and start it again because now she's calling him fish lips, and she said she could have punched him, but she didn't punch him, and so they went on and did the show.
Obviously, that is not what I wanted, and I felt like he wrote that just to get that piece in because
Yeah.
he knew he wasn't going to get it on stage, and
That's
that
right.
was why he was badgering me to do it then when we were alone because that's what he wanted. And then, 5 minutes later, we had to go out on stage. I had to be an actress. I had to go out on stage with this guy who just did this to me 5 minutes before and act like he's my best friend.
All right, stop it right there. Sexual assault so far, Whitlock?
I mean, it's kind of tricky because she did agree to kiss him. I mean, he took it a little far, but
Sexual assault? Really?
not sexual assault.
Or jerk? Which one?
This was a sexual gesture. I guess it's the same thing,
but-
but it's levels.
So let me understand. So a kiss is considered a sexual thing?
She,
I mean,
yes,
kiss on the lips is
yes,
what I mean.
but she agreed. So this one is kind of different.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to understand the sexual assault thing.
If somebody kisses me, that I don't want.
That back of the head thing. I mean, the man should. He knew better than to grab a woman by the back of the head. You never do that. You don't ever do that.
I feel because she kissed him and gave him consent, this one is a tricky one. It'd be different if he just grabbed her head and made her kiss him, but she agreed, whether it was for a playful matter or acting.
Well, she agreed to act like they were. She didn't agree to actually get the long, deep throat
And
kind
the
of
hand
grab the mucus
behind
from
the
your
head.
Adam's apple thing. She's. So I didn't hear yes or no.
I would say
You're
yes.
undecided about it.
It's,
I
it's
don't know.
difficult because this is not an extreme case of it, but it's still unwarranted.
I'm trying to understand how things like this become sexual assault. Is what I'm trying to
Well, a
figure
kiss
out.
is sexual.
Well, I see some women lining up. We're going to go to them. A kiss is sexual.
Yes.
A kiss is sexual.
I would say a kiss is intimate, personal. Kiss on the lips. I don't know.
Kisses lead to other things.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, just a stare can lead to
Real
other things.
Yeah.
The real
A
thing.
stare can work with that. I don't know. I mean, I kissed my mom, not in the mouth. I do know some guys who kissed their mom in the mouth. I couldn't do that because my daddy wouldn't let me. I wouldn't want to anyway. And my daddy told me that. He said, "Boy, that's your mama, but that's my girl.
That's right.
That's my woman. You better back down." I backed down too. We'll get to this. All right, so as she continues, go ahead, let's finish it out because then there's a photograph that shows Al Franken doing what comedians do as far as I'm concerned.
gentleman, and this is the greatest thing ever, and do our lines, and trust me, he didn't even get close to my face when we had to come in for the kissing scene. And I mean, look, I was afraid to speak out 11 years ago.
Why?
I wanted to say something, and there were people around
What?
me who said, "Oh my God, you will get annihilated, and you will never work in this town again." And I was afraid of that.
So you did it
I
as
was afraid of that.
for your best interest,
You know,
and
I was
you were
working
quiet.
at the West Ham Sports Show. I was working at Fox Sports. I mean, I had a good
I know.
career, and I thought,
All right, fine. That's enough. See, again, now she made the decision at that point to say nothing, not to slap him, not to knee him, in where he should have been kneed. She made that decision as an adult, that it was a career move, no less than some other women who would possibly feel that they could do that and get to the top.
She felt that it was worth it. She didn't want to put her whole career.
I'm just simply saying she made a decision. That was not, in other words, she knew that he had made an attempt to become amorous. And it was unwarranted. Sexual? No. But she knew that. Then, of course, there's a photograph of him showing. This is what guys do to guys like this. Here's what they do. See, I tell you that these guys get to the highest levels, and they're not very good lookers. They're not smooth guys. And, these are the guys that feel they could, as long as they keep a girl laughing, that there's an opportunity that maybe some things would happen. But they really all become clowns, and then, the girl ends up saying, I just look at you as a brother. We just laugh, we have laughs together. I can't take you seriously. They're not comfortable looking at a woman deep in her eyes and saying, every time I look at you, I envision a wonderful beach with you and I, running through the Siamese-colored sands toward each other, only to meet in one blissful, warm, steamy moment, falling down into the warm waters of the Caribbean, feeling the water splash on our face and lap on our bodies.
Drip, drip.
See, a guy who's a comedian can't say that. Frank, you can't. You're not gonna look at him seriously.
Would you like
Try to
go
whisper
on
something.
the island with me and be on the beach? Let's lay down in the sand and have the waves lap over our bodies in the sun.
Want to kiss? How about this?
Grains of sand
Wait,
lodged
let me lick my lips.
deep in our crevices.
Let's practice the kiss.
Now let's practice.
Let's practice.
So they got this picture going around, and let me just tell you, oxygen surgeons are having a hissing trying to compare this with more, and these guys don't have a clue. So I see this picture here. You have this jerk, as in Franklin, or Franken, before he was a senator. Wanting to get the last laugh in because she's now calling him fish mouth. She's calling him fish mouth. He doesn't have a comeback. He doesn't have a comeback. I guarantee you she shared this with other girlfriends. You kiss me. His mouth is so wet. He jammed his tongue down, and it was a fart tongue, too. I mean, you know what I mean? A guy can't recover from that. So, just to get a laugh, okay, so you take the picture, and I'm just going to... Not that I think it's good. Not that I think it's bad, either. I think they were both performers, and she did exactly what she's supposed to do, insult him very sternly, and actually she should have went ahead and put a good rap across the lips, don't you think, Ron?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
However, this was not back then. This is within the last 10 years, you see. Back then was 20, 30 years ago, doing the Judge Moore syndrome days. That's when, it was acceptable. However, even back then, ladies and gentlemen, there would have been ability to rebuff. Amen. It was. And let me just tell you, you didn't go out and insult a lady. Because then you're going to have her brothers, her uncles to deal with. Let me tell you who you insulted back then, Judge Moore. You insulted the little girls. Those individuals who were powerless. That's a pedophile, ladies and gentlemen. 30-something years old, seeking out a 14, 15-year-old girl. Trust me on this. He knew he wouldn't get a rap on the lips. He knew he wouldn't get a knee to the groin. He knew that lady couldn't just simply go to the beauty parlor and tell all the other ladies and his name will become dog food. Well, the opposite of dog food. He knew that, which is why he preyed at the mall on little girls. Big difference here. Big difference here. And for the president not to say that and any other man not to say that, it makes me wonder what kind of person you are. Just so happens, ladies and gentlemen, the beleaguered judge who wants to be the senator, and looking at some of his judgments as it applies to cases that he had whereby there was a defendant, sex case. 20 cases. Out of the 20 cases that focused on sexual crimes and misconduct, 13 of those cases, Judge Moore decided, well, he sided with the defendant, the guy who had perpetrated the sex crime. I'm just saying. And now, of course, in some of these cases, it was the cases were on appeal. This is how he was a state Supreme Court justice. And some of these cases were appeal cases, whereby the guy who had been found guilty was appealing the case, and the judge was like, okay, well, yeah, let's accept the appeal. Most of the time, the unanimous decision by the court was not to hear the case because it was just so slam dunk. Moore was one of 2 justices who voted against. Well, he voted to hear the case, particularly when it's a slam dunk. In other words, when you have a case involving a pedophile who's been found guilty in a lower court, and this pedophile appeals to the Supreme Court, the majority of the court said, no. They count the guy in the bedroom with the infant, with the diaper off, and DNA on him. What? Well, I think we need to take this up on appeal. All right, folks, it's Friday. We talk about whatever you want to talk about and a whole lot more. Miss Lee, you're next. We'll be back.
The Jackson Advocate newspaper has been the voice